Straight talk about the issues you care about the most. It's LaVeist and Claville, empowerment for the culture. Now, your hosts, Dr. Wil LaVeist and Dr. Eric Claville.
Hey, I'm Wil LaVeist. He's Eric Claville. You're tuning into LaVeist and Claville, where we give it to you straight the way it is, from a black male's perspective, because it's like that, and that's the way it is. So let's get to the show. This next installment in our Blk Tax series is politics over profit. We know that historically, black communities have been systematically deprived of the ability to build wealth at the same levels as whites. From segregation cutting blacks off from engaging a broader economic community, to urban renewal, destroying black business districts, to black communities continuing to be undercapitalized. Music mogul Pharrell Williams has been among the current generation of entrepreneurs calling for greater economic justice for black and brown communities. And on October 28th, 2021, Pharrell Williams held a forum at Norfolk State University to discuss full potential of the cities of Norfolk and Virginia Beach, which is his native city. And the panel included business leaders and experts, including yours truly, Eric Claville. So Williams said one of the things that he wanted to accomplish was that he wanted business leaders to invest in the Hampton Roads region, which is what Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Hampton, Newport News area is called. And I quote, he said, "For too long, it's been politics over profit. That just doesn't make sense." So Claville, you were there. Talk about the forum and what that experience was like and what you think people got out of it, what came across.
Right. So, Wil, the forum itself was called Elephant in the Room. That's Elephant in the Room. You can go, you can Google it. It's on Yahoo. You have Stories. Black Enterprise wrote a story on it. Essence Magazine also printed a story. You can look at nsu.edu and look at our story that we did on it as well. And also was covered internationally. Right. The Zambian Celebrity Magazine did a full spread story on it also. So that's
excellent.
Yeah, so it had coverage all the way over in East Africa because he is an international star and a native born, Virginia Beach, loves his home, grew up loving the Spartan Legion band. We listened to the band all the time. So that was his inspiration. So he always felt a connection to HBCUs. He always felt that at least some of what he's doing should be at HBCU, and he loves Norfolk State University. So with that, we were fortunate enough to be able to host that forum, to have that conversation. And it just shows the influence. I just want to take a pause here to say it shows the influence that HBCUs have on people, our people, and the things that they're doing across the world. So he's definitely not one shy of acknowledging, like a lot of us, our HBCU education and background and things that we're doing. He even called it a gem, of talent, a golden gem, a place of talent of HBCUs. So with that being the case, the reason why this came about, right, is because after his very successful Something in the Water, which was tremendously successful.
Right. Pre-pandemic, 2019, pre-pandemic, great concert, Virginia Beach waterfront, oceanfront.
Oh, man. Absolutely. So, I'm talking about stars upon stars upon stars. Yeah. Look, when he picks up the phone and say, "Hey, I need you here," people run, because he's really that connector that he talked about not wanting to be a toxic person, but a person that's a connector.
Yeah.
So
he wanted to be a nutrient when they asked him, not be a toxin. He wanted to be a nutrient and try to change the toxic environment that he's been talking about around.
Exactly. And with that conference, like you said, it was pre-pandemic. And not only was it just a concert, because I don't want people to think it was just music, people on the beach, even though it was when you saw it, it was just, at least 100,000 people came throughout those several days. Mm-hmm. But he also had empowerment conferences, forums in the conference center. So it was very similar to the Essence Festival, what we grew up with in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, that's held those empowerment conference pieces, and then of course the super stages and the stage where you have the music and so forth. So with that, there was, because of his success, right? Mm-hmm. He felt politics got involved. Didn't feel like it did get involved, to where basically he had to walk to a different beat. So as a drummer, he couldn't drum to his own beat. He had to go to a different beat. And it was just so much pushback to the point where COVID helped to save, the actual concert from being canceled that year.
Really?
A lot of it. Yeah. Really? Because of the level of toxicity that was involved.
So even after the success,
millions of dollars. Millions of dollars.
I think the number I saw was like a $25 million impact to the local community.
I think it was a little higher. It was around 36 million.
Okay, 36 million impact. So you're saying that even after
one weekend.
Right. I mean, because 25, 36, one weekend that's significant. So you're saying that after that, there was actually a lot of pushback that to the point where it was possible that there wasn't going to be a follow-up event if COVID hit. I mean, what was the deal with that?
Well, again, when we talk about politics, we talk about gatekeepers. So you have gatekeepers that basically control certain areas. And it's, all places are like that, right? I mean, when we look at Congress, we have gatekeepers in Congress. We have gatekeepers in the entertainment industry, gatekeepers all over, right? Now, emerging markets, you don't really have those gatekeepers. The things are emerging. But ultimately, he felt, and a lot of us feel, that profit, good economics should take precedence, right? To the point where you have had a mass exodus of decades of individuals in government, of middle management, that left the city because of a lot of issues. But his conference wasn't the only one that was pulled out, but two others left the city as well to go to the neighboring city of Norfolk. So one was the Patriot Festival. Of all festivals, it left and came to Norfolk.
So you're saying there was a change in sort of the political climate. So some people came in a place that had less of an affinity to these events.
It wasn't a change. It was a political climate that always existed. So you had people that wanted to leave because of that. But like I said, we're using this situation as an example of what takes place and limits African-American upper mobility as well. So with that, Will, we also saw other festivals leave. We saw individuals just leave management of government that had decades of experience because of their frustration, with things that were going on. And these were white individuals as well. So they're not just African-American, because there is a old guard that doesn't get the new guard. The new guard understands, right? Hey, things opening up, you got to be more inclusive, more diverse. Right. And a lot of individuals our age and a bit younger, we grew up in an integrated society. Right. I mean, so we understand. Like at that concert, you had more white individuals than you had black individuals. Right. Because that type of music, hip hop.
Right. It crosses over, it brings a lot of different groups of people together.
Absolutely.
The interesting thing, you were mentioning, HBCUs and the impact is that a lot of people do not know the history that goes back with Virginia Beach and the Black community and young people and events actually goes back to the debacle that happened back in the 80s with a Black Beach Week or Black Greek Week. And forgive me, because this is my era. Right. And it was a total mess where a lot of Black students from HBCUs like mine, Lincoln, yours, Southern, all over the place, Howard, come down to Virginia Beach for spring break activities, hanging out, just like kids do.
Right.
And that turned into a situation that's reminiscent of, you think about just recently down at the Texas border where you had police, you had border patrol on horseback, chasing down Haitians. It had that kind of visual vibe is what was going on in Virginia Beach oceanfront back in the 80s. And so for several years, right, a lot of the tension of the Black community, a lot of folks were like, I'm boycotting Virginia Beach. I'm not having anything to do with that. And it was actually some years, took a couple of decades, some years later, for the Funk Fest to be an event that actually brought back a lot of the people from that generation, such as myself, because I've been at the Funk Fest, as a media, a speaker on stage and all of that. It brought that generation for the first time said, okay, I'm going to give Virginia Beach a shot, and started coming back and embracing that event, which has now led to this event, something at the water. And so to hear that you still have these tensions in Virginia Beach, knowing that it wanted to get past that blotch on its, in its past, as in its reputation, that you still have, you said, to your point, old guard that is still rooted in that old mentality that we don't really want this kind of, quote unquote, this kind of element here in our community.
Exactly. And Will, that is the history of it. And you're exactly right. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to, kind of bridge that history. I mean, bridge those generations. And he did. I mean, that was a truly successful, entire weekend. And everybody was looking forward to the second, the follow-up, because there was hesitation. One of my colleagues, who was a city councilman, who is a city councilman of Virginia Beach, he was the only one that was really pushing it and for it. And he was, and again, someone that also grew up from Norfolk State, ended up going to the NFL and coming back and serving on the city council. And he really pushed and said, look, this is what we need to do. And he stood there. And keep in mind, people didn't know, like, oh no, what's going to happen? We're bringing all these hip hop guys here in town.
Right.
But a lot of their kids were there. And more so, again, it was about 60%, about 65% non-African American, more so white.
Because that's who's embracing the music. Yeah, right.
Exactly. So it was a huge success. So they were excited for the second year. And of course, the toxicity of it, he said, I'm not going to hold it. He just canceled it. And the business leaders, the business leaders, the majority of them were actually being very vocal, saying, we got to get this together. Right. We're losing money. We got to be more inclusive. But again, the gatekeepers are saying, well, I think everything's fine, and just waiting it out. But when you have festival after festival leave and you get this black eye, and the neighboring city, which is the city of Norfolk, which is not a beach city, but we do have water. Water, of course, in Hampton Roads. Will, you lived here for years as well with me.
Yeah, you need some water. I mean, you
right.
need it. Yeah.
You're going to get water. So to get anywhere, you got to cross a bridge and go through a tunnel and then across another bridge. So, water is everywhere. The water goes everywhere. So what he wanted to do, he wanted to have a conversation about profit over politics. And with that conversation was had. And what he did was he not just brought local business leaders, but what he did, he brought local business leaders to be present. But he brought he brought people that he's done business with, private equity. So for an entire day, half a day and evening, I was fortunate enough to coordinate and host over $3 trillion in managed as individuals that represented over $3 trillion in managed assets to talk about their investment of emerging markets, young entrepreneurs, diverse markets, both markets in Latin America, markets in Africa, markets across the globe.
Right.
Investing $5 billion here for this initiative, $100 million here for this initiative, and some very well-known private equity groups such as BlackRock, SoftBank, and the like. Okay. And of course, we talked about Black Ambition, Pharrell's initiative to invest in young African American business owners.
He announced that back in, I believe that was back in 2020 when he did the virtual commencement speech at Norfolk State. Yeah. And he talked about that and also talked about that nonprofit. Which was very powerful. Yeah. Which you actually had a student from Hampton. I believe her name was, who was actually the winner, Khadija Doso. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, she actually won the $250,000 for investment.
Right, $250,000, and then Hampton also got $75,000 in unrestricted funds, to help develop entrepreneurship. I mean, that's powerful stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that's that's impressive about Pharrell Williams is that he is one of among, and I've always been, as a hip hop kid, a hip hop baby, impressed with the entrepreneurial aspects of hip hop. And a lot of the brothers and sisters recognizing that, it's not just about the music, but it's also about the development and the entrepreneurship, the owning of your intellectual property and all of these things, and then actually developing, communities. I mean, it's been impressive. I wanted to break down. You said the forum was broken down into, what was it, 3 parts? You said who we've been, who we are now, and who will become.
Exactly.
So with that,
it talked about the history. And the first one was talking about the history of just the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is the history of a lot of African Americans and a lot of African Americans in our country, how we were blocked out from opportunity. And we've talked extensively about that. You can tune into the Claville report and listen to how we also discuss laws and public policy and how it impacts our lives. And, with that, it just basically shed light upon to those who were there to say, listen, this is why we're in this place. We're in now because of the history that we have yet to deal with. Right. And it's just history. It happened. It's not to say that the people here are bad. It's not to say that the people here are good. What it's to say is that because of what happened, there are some of you that benefit and a lot of us that do not. Right. So we got to recognize and call a thing. Call it like it is.
Right. We didn't just drop here. We didn't just all drop here just yesterday and start running a race together with all the same equality. I mean, there's a history of a whole segment of the population, groups of people, being systematically prevented from, as we said at the top of the show, engaging in the broader economic development and wealth. So things as simple as having land and being able to work the land to build wealth, Black people, indigenous people, systematically locked out of those kinds of opportunities. So, you should be, if you embrace that understanding that if your grandfather left you something, was able to acquire land and hand that down to you, then you must, and how that has benefited you today, you must also be able to embrace and start to have some openness to the fact that if somebody else's great-great-grandfather was prevented from having any opportunities like that, it's got to impact his descendants today.
Absolutely. And Will, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what they wanted to get across. And and they did. The second panel was, where we are now, right? So we talked about investment, and there were individuals on the stage from private equity groups that are currently doing things now. Young brother from BlackRock, who was on there, also the head of his Black Ambition group as well. The rapper Pusha T, who also has a foundation, which I had an opportunity to meet with the head of their foundation. Come to find out, we're actually from the same hometown. So, it was a lot of great connections there, and then others. And Will, it talked about what those individuals, the impact they're making in the community now. But then what we can be, that was the forum, that was the panel that I was involved in,
right.
Where I was on the stage of about 2 trillion of that 3 trillion in managed assets, and it was just phenomenal listening to the stories of their impact that they're making across the globe. You have these individuals who are of different. I think it was probably maybe one American or maybe 2 Americans on the stage. Everyone was, of course, from diverse countries, all the way from either Nigeria or from Australia or somewhere other countries, but converged here in the United States, being educated, and then here on the campus of the largest HBCU in the Commonwealth, Norfolk State University in the city of Norfolk. And just listening to the impact that they're making, not thinking about the political makeup of the area, but thinking about the people, thinking about the needs of the people, what the ideas of the people, what it takes to get individuals there. And then I talked about how everything that I was the last speaker and I summed it up. And basically I talked about how everything that was discussed was intentional. You got to be intentional to make true change. Right. It just doesn't happen. Like you said, Will, it doesn't fall out the sky. You got to be intentional. Right. You got to be intentional to admit what the wrong is, intentional to have a focus, being purposeful to correct the wrong. And then thirdly, be intentional to do what you need to do in order to make the biggest impact that you possibly can. Right. And ultimately, I also talked about how we can't just do this out of goodwill. It happens. But in order to have long-term impact, we need accountability. And that's where policy comes in. Policy equals accountability. Whether it's corporate policy, whether it's local policy, whether it's state or governmental policy, whatever it is, right. Policy equals accountability. Because now we have some guidelines to go by. Now we have something written down. And I talked about my theory of law, policy, and politics. Law and public policy, how it controls 3 things in its intent or in its effect. And that's to control people's beliefs and resources. And then lastly, I talked about the pendulum, the theory of the pendulum of change.
That sounded like critical race theory or something. That sounded like that bogeyman word.
Well, the pendulum of change is, we're here now. But now it swings to the extreme, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a coin, heads is one side, it swings to the extreme, is tails. It just is. But it's something that causes that change and something that causes it to go back and forth. And what causes that change is the intentionality of those groups that we have there. You want to create real change. Secondly, what causes it to swing back and forth, a pendulum itself, or invisible forces, I call it, whether it be social forces, whatever they may be, which individuals on both sides of that pendulum go through this kind of a dance of saying, well, maybe we should go this far, maybe we should go this far, maybe we go this far, and eventually, it settles in the middle. And when it settles in the middle, we're there, and then that's where policy is made and solidified in the middle. That's how it happens.
Is that swinging back and forth? Is that where the politics is interplaying with the situation? Is that where the politics over, profit and development becomes an issue? Or?
Well, I would say, yeah, you could say it's politics, or you could just call it negotiation. Being able to go back, because I can't come to you if you've been operating this way for years and say we're going to operate this way without some pushback. You're going to pull that thing back and say, wait a minute. But that gives us an opportunity to talk. And of course, politics is about that, negotiation, talking, and then some other things. But for the most part, that's where we are. So with that being the case, the power or force to create change are those individuals who are intentional, those individuals who are purposeful, those individuals that say we are going to go this way because this is the best way for us to go and for us to make the best, the most impactful, and the greatest change that we can make.
As you were sitting there and listening, and even during your own presentation, I mean, what kind of aha moments were prevalent, from any of the other speakers, or what did you hear that was a aha moment?
For me, what was an aha moment was when Pharrell ended. He had the last words. He says, "I haven't given up, on my city." He said, "I want this to be an opportunity," and he did make a statement. He did say he promised people that he wouldn't talk about politics tonight, but he did acknowledge. He said, "You are correct. Everything you just said is right." And we actually spoke and had some words afterwards, after we embraced and so forth. It was a really good moment. He agreed with everything I said, but he wants to bring people together. And really what came to me was, again, how he said, "I haven't given up on my city. I want to make a difference." To me, that's showing people how intentional and how thoughtful and how just good natured that he is. I will say this too. We did have the mayor in the house of both Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and other individuals and all business leaders. And they were put on notice to say things have got to change. But we're also excited about the opportunity to really, what he wanted to show was the value of HBCUs. Right. And the value. And just we had a private reception afterwards. And there was only a handful of us there, maybe 50 or so. And in that reception, he talked about how he wanted to show, what we can do. This moment, what we can do as a human race, as a people and a human race. Right. And, he wanted to be at a white glove level, and he wanted to be perfect, and it was. Mm-hmm. You remember there was a well-known former reporter who's now a communications consultant here in the area, who made a statement, and they interviewed him. And he said, they interviewed him and said, what do you think happened here tonight? And he said, listen, he said, you have the white business leadership that came to the campus of Norfolk State University, not knowing what to expect. He said, but what they got was, they got a crash course in social justice, and they were put on notice of the change that's going to take place. So that needs to take place. So he was, it was not just a forum, but it was, they had chefs there. He had representatives of his school there, Yellow, that represented. They had youth chefs that work with the real chefs that were there. It was just a top class event, hands down, across the board. And it was absolutely a beautiful night. And it didn't start raining until after it was all over. So we were praying for that too.
I think about you saying his statement on he hadn't given up on his city, because another important element of all of this is the death of his cousin, Donovan Lynch, who was died at the hands of a police officer, in a shooting. And so this case is very much under investigation. Pharrell and the family are calling for a federal investigation into this. So this is also part of this mix of you're trying to get over a city's history and blotch of, racial tension, racial injustice. And then here he's trying to play an important role in this healing and this moving forward with his event, with his activities, with his nonprofit. And then he's hit personally, close to home, again, with the same issue that Black people in Hampton Roads, quite frankly, and in America, period, have been dealing with since day one. This being confronted with this kind of violence, in the midst of an authority that is supposed to be here to protect and serve. So I would imagine that tension, that vibe was very much present. And but to hear him and look at the interviews and hear him talking about, I want to be a nutrient, I want to be a healer. I mean, that had to be impactful as well. You said you had some private conversations. I know private means private, but is there anything that or else that was shared, not necessarily on camera or on mic, that you're at liberty to maybe let people know about?
Sure. So not so much other than what was recorded, I'll say that. But what I will say is that I had the fortunate opportunity to actually conduct the panel for his cousin and for his father, the father and the uncle. And I hosted that forum on the campus of Norfolk State as well. Reverend Barber also came through, and he was online, and he was a part of the panel discussion. And we had several individuals that were there. So I got to know the family very, very intimately. I got to know the situation very intimately, and I got to know a lot of other things surrounding that. So it was a great opportunity, again, to come to solutions. And keep in mind, everything that we do is about being solution-based.
Right.
You know what the problems are, Will. I mean, we all know the problems. The question becomes, how can we be solution-based to solve those problems? So other than what he told me, he said he's never heard anyone put politics and law into something like that before. So he really loved how I put it together and basically summed it up. But moving forward is really all about solutions. It's all about solutions, all about finding solutions for the problem and bringing people together, not pointing fingers, but coming together like this to create the biggest impact through economics. And that's a different approach, Will, because a lot of times we are looking at creating change from a civil rights issue and social justice piece, through marching, through the law and the like. But he wants to do it through economics, and that brings to mind. We were talking before this show, the famous debate between Du Bois and Washington.
Right.
Where
Du Bois and Booker T. Exactly. Yeah.
Where Washington said, hey, let's not get into the civil rights push. Let's deal with economics first. Because if we create the best product, green knows no color. If you create the best product, people are going to come to you. He was exactly right, Will, exactly right. And it goes to the story of how, the students from Tuskegee made the best bricks. And they made the best bricks because everybody came and bought their bricks, and the like, and how he was very intentional on controlling his image and working with some of the largest benefactors of his time in order to get monies. And if you adjust for inflation, I saw one one article where it said he had raised the equivalent of over $1 billion for Tuskegee University during his time there. I mean, that is tremendous. If you really think about that. But again, Du Bois, and I'll let you talk about Du Bois, but even Marcus Garvey was so attracted, to that vision and to that route of achieving equity and equality, that he was inspired to form his movement. And of course, he didn't have the chance to meet Booker T. Washington because he had unfortunately passed away before he had a chance to meet him. But talk a little bit about Du Bois, and where do you think we can go as African Americans today in order to achieve that type of equity?
Well, I think Du Bois's approach was more about the not being an anti-business development, but being about intellectual development, being about gaining political power, being about getting respect, and being treated as human beings in that way. I actually think that both of them were correct. And the irony is that you see it in Martin Luther King, because Martin Luther King, when he was before he went off the scene, what was he talking about before he went off the scene? He had recognized that gaining political empowerment was important, but it had its limits.
Yeah.
And he recognized that there was a need for a shift to economic development and empowerment. So why I say both of them were correct, because, for example, let's look at Black Wall Street. Let's look at it. Here's a town, Black folk are self-sufficient, are having their own businesses, supplying the dollars circulating in the community. But then what happens? As soon as whites decide they need an excuse to go and destroy that, they're able to do that without impunity, with no repercussions. So if you take that view and you look at it, you say, okay, you can develop economically, but if you don't have the law to protect those interests, then you end up with a Black Wall Street situation. So you actually need both. Those kinds of protections that were able to be gained through the civil rights movement, through the law, we are a nation of laws, are critical also to being able to protect you as you're developing business and wealth. So I think a lot of times, I think that both of them were actually correct, and they were men of their times. And I think that we are in a time now where absolutely there's a need for Black economic development, but not at the expense of continuing to develop Black political power and being conscious of the law and all of those things. I think that we've got to fully immerse ourselves into the entire society. We've fought in being segregated. You were locked out of that ability, as we said at the beginning of the show, to be able to engage in the broader society and broader community. So you're always limited. People like to reminisce about, back in the day when we had our own communities, we had this, we had that, we were self-sufficient. Yeah, that's true. But a lot of folks were still struggling and was broke. All right? It wasn't like back then, Black life, people was living high on the hog. And a lot of those people who lived in Tulsa, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, were servants leaving the community, going and had jobs in white community, working as servants, and then coming home in the community. So again, there was still this limit. There's still this limit of being able to fully exercise yourself as a human being and as a citizen of these United States. And that's what Du Bois was talking about. That's what Frederick Douglass was talking about. That's what, all say we are human beings. We should be full citizens. We should not accept a lower station. But Booker T, as I saw, was more of a strategy of, okay, we will eventually, by making ourselves indispensable, will raise, our station. But I think it requires both. I think you can't, it's not a this or that. It requires both.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree with you, but also I like to, like you say, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as the saying says, right, as it goes. So political influence is very key. But the economics, and I want to give I think the economics is number one, because I want to give this example. The Asian hate bill and the George Floyd crime bill, all right? Both essentially were doing the same thing. There were some provisions that was there that addressed crime and how you handle the Black community through a criminal justice aspect. Mm-hmm. But the Asian hate bill also addressed, criminal aspects as relates to hate crimes against that community, which was the right thing to do. I mean, we saw some horrific. I'm really surprised we didn't see it after the internment of the Japanese. But the bill finally made its way. It was the right thing to do. But that bill was passed with extraordinary speed. Mm-hmm. And the George Floyd crime bill basically is dead in the water. Now, which group would you say has more political power or political influence? I would say that the African-American community has more political representatives. And we can swing elections, as we're going to talk about later in another episode, the impact of the 2021 midterm elections and the impact of the 2020 presidential election in the Black community. But the economic impact or influence, I don't think is matched still with the Asian American community. So,
but is there another aspect of that? Is there another aspect of, well, it's more easily politically expedient to pass that bill with less pushback, less repercussions to do that, and you get a twofer? You're still doing something for people of color. Mm-hmm. Is that an element that's in there as well? That is less risky to pass such a bill than it would be to pass a bill for, relating to African Americans. And now the next thing that's going to happen, the next thing they'll want is critical race theory taught in elementary school, right? I mean, that's the fear, isn't it?
Well, you bring up a very important point because, you do have the fear aspect, right? And some call it fear mongering, but mm-hmm. You do have the fear aspect. And I think that's one thing where, you have to be mindful that could be a major factor in it. It's tricky. It's very tricky. I mean, there is no, and I think when you and I are talking, I think people can understand there's no one size that fits all.
Right.
There is no easy fix because you also have different communities, right? So for individuals like you and I, who are college educated, doctorate level, professional degrees, and the like, to us, economics is more important, and we have more influence in that area. And we're not too much concerned. Well, I would say too much concerned about, but the other area is less likely, right? That we would be concerned, even though we know, and you and I understand, as Black men, Black fathers, raising Black sons, that's just that part on the street is just as important because right. Once we take off this blazer, once we leave the office, people look at us as just being another Black man in America. Hmm. And I think 2020 showed that with the bird watcher, Chris in New York.
Definitely. But I wonder about that again with what is more politically expedient and acceptable. And again, we both agree that Asian hate crime bill should have been passed. It absolutely should have been passed. But absolutely. I also look at, and again, a lot of times it's race being played, and then it's also coming back to the green. So, for example, think about the shooting that happened in Connecticut during the Obama administration with the children being gunned down in Connecticut, right? Who in their right mind would say, come on, we've got to do something to address this situation? Yeah. But what happened? Congress somehow found a way to not do anything. And so, and these were predominantly white children, right? Yeah. So what was behind that? Again, it's not as politically good idea to do that, even though it's the right thing to do. Politically, it's problematic. It could, I could lose my position. I could lose my, my donations and funding over this. I can lose my shot. So I think that is also an element that politicians, better than I do. I know as a journalist, I haven't covered them, but as a researcher, a consultant, they weigh all of these different things, and doing the right thing a lot of times takes a back seat. It doesn't even make it. It doesn't even make it on. It doesn't even make it in the car. It doesn't even make it on the bus. If it doesn't poll right. So I think that's an element that's in here too.
So again, when we talk about the Black tax on the African Americans, we got to look at, what is, it's not an easy fix. One time you have profit. You have wealth, but even though you're wealthy, you're an international star. Mm-hmm. If a small group of gateholders say absolutely no, to this Black man, it's absolutely no. Right. And there's not a lot you can do outside of galvanizing a group of individuals to say, hey, we can push the narrative, but there's no guarantee there. But at the same time, when we band together for social issues and marching traditionally and pushing policy for accountability, then you have true change. But again, like you said, you need both. And for us, as we can see, that pendulum still swings back and forth.
Well, actually, I'm impressed still with Pharrell and others in the hip hop community. Killer Mike is another example of somebody who understands economic development and is pushing for that. And I think that it's a great thing to see, and it gives me hope for the generation coming behind them that is looking at them and emulating them, and especially on these Black colleges, that they're realizing, they're thinking in terms of, when I get out of here, it's not I want to just go and work for someone. When I get out of here, I want to go and start a business and even if I have to work for someone in the meantime, I'm going to have a side hustle, or I'm going to do them simultaneously, but I'm going to develop my multiple revenue streams, because I believe that Martin Luther King was very much right at that point when he was leaving and recognizing, no, we need economic development. And he was speaking very forcefully to those issues of how we're spending so much money on war that is hamstringing our ability to be able to address the economic disparities that exist in the community. And here we are, just been in America's longest war, 20 years over in Afghanistan.
And what do we have to show for it?
And what do we have to show for it? And you and I know from covering, being a columnist in that area and a journalist in that area, that it's the military families that oftentimes are the ones who least want to be engaged in a war. They're patriotic, they're doing their job, they love their country, but they suffer the greatest sacrifice. It's those soldiers. Like, we see the passing of Colin Powell. And that's a soldier, and he was reluctant to go to war because he understood what it was all about and the cost, not just financial, but in human capital. And so it's really important that at this time, again, coming on the heels of being in America's longest war, and America has perpetually been at war. People need to understand that from the wars against the Native Americans on to the present day, America has been perpetually at war. Maybe now we are entering a time where we can put down those guns for a second. Well, yeah, I know. The journalist in me is coming back and saying,
right. I don't know about that.
But hopefully, from an economic standpoint, that in our community, we can see the need for both, with a strong emphasis on wealth building and developing economically. Because without that, we're just going to continue to go in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
As people.
Absolutely. So, again, we want to thank all of you for joining us for this segment. Our time is up. As we discuss the Black tax, profit over politics, the impact of African Americans in upper mobility, in economic upper mobility, in the current and past environment. Where do we go from here? For those of us, again, that want to take a look at the forum that took place, go to Elephant in the Room. Google Elephant in the Room. Mm-hmm. You can look at the Yahoo story, the Black Enterprise, Essence Magazine, or at www.nsu.edu. Also, you can go to YouTube and put Elephant in the Room at NSU. And for those of you that want to continue to follow us, share, like, join us on our social media at LaVeist and Claville. That's at LaVeist and Claville, or go to our website, at www.LaVeistandClaville.com. And until next time, God bless. We'll see.
Thanks for listening to another episode of LaVeist and Claville. Make sure you subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. For information or to connect with LaVeist and Claville, check out our website at www.LaVeistandClaville.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to @the LaVeist and Claville on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. This has been the latest episode of LaVeist and Claville.